Hi everyone, it's our live Instagram, your ascension update, that also discussing the mental chamber of vitality. Unfortunately, Candace couldn't make it today, so I'll just give a few more people the opportunity to join, and then we'll kick off talking about our mental well-being in the context of this ascension process. I'm sure many of you have felt the solstice energies really building, being very powerful. For some it has felt quite blissful, for others a little bit more disruptive, but I'm hoping that with today's discussion I can give you some ideas and tools as to how to manage these quite powerful and massive energy downloads that we have been experiencing and that we continue to experience all the time. I feel it's been really quite something compared to what we had previously. Just waiting for a few more people to join, and if you have any questions about the mental aspect, which I will describe and chat about this morning, please let me know in the comments. If you have any questions or any ideas or any input or experience for us to share. As I'm just waiting for a few more people to join, I wanted to also just use this update to talk about our fast that a few of us are attempting or doing this week. I like to coincide the longer fasts with something like a solstice or an equinox, because I feel then it's really being supported energetically, and one can become quite intentional about that. You can become quite deliberate with what it is you want to invite in or set your intention for, not just for the fast, but we know we've just had a wonderful and powerful new moon, and then we've got the solstice this week. So for some people, I know I usually mention the 21st, but it's between the 21st and the 23rd of June, where we have in the southern hemisphere the longest night, the shortest day, and then in the northern hemisphere we've got the longest day and the shortest night. I will be doing a group meditation on Wednesday evening, 8:30 South African time, for those of you who would like to join. The details are in my feed if you feel like that would be supportive for you. So I am about 36 hours into my fast with a small group of people, drinking liquids, I am having some coffee. There was a slight touch of hunger last night, but not too much, and very manageable. I'm feeling great this morning. I went for a swim in the ocean for the first time in about 2 weeks, which was magnificent and just so lovely. Anyway, hi Kathy, I see that you've joined. I'm going to get going so that I don't keep you too long. So Candace and I started this series about the ascension tools and how you can support your body on all different levels to be able to not just manage, but be able to thrive during these quite extraordinary times. And last week we talked about the physical aspect. If you haven't watched that video, it is saved on both my feed and Candace's feed, so it was a little bit longer than we anticipated, but if you want to catch up, it is there. You can always go back to that, as well as our introductory talk. So we called this series The Art of Alchemy, and it's a collaboration between the two of us. I will be talking today about the mental chamber of well-being or vitality. So what is our mental chamber all about, or the mental aspects when it comes to well-being, but also in the context of ascension? So for me, I usually think of the mental aspect as our thoughts, our thinking, our brain, our mind. So everything that happens here. We also have our crown chakra right here at the top. So a lot of information and light can keep coming through into the rest of the body if we remain open here. But so essentially it is about how we are nourishing our minds, how we are nourishing our thoughts. So in terms of how to support the mental aspect of our well-being, for me, I usually start with our diet, how we nourish our bodies, because that makes such a big difference to how we function. And more, especially in June being the month of mental well-being, in the context of dementia and Alzheimer's, research has shown that our diet and our lifestyle can make a massive difference to how we protect and preserve our brains. When it comes to diet, for me, the two main culprits in deteriorating brain health or cognitive decline would be the grains, the gluten, the wheat, barley, oats, and rye. Yes, and a lot of people think that oats is good for you, but for the brain and the gut, and those two really work together, what happens in the digestive tract will ultimately translate into something happening in the brain. And we have found more and more that the modern grains are not really good for our brains. Dr. Paul Mutter wrote a book. He's a neurologist, and his book is called The Grain Brain, if you want to go and have a look at that. And he also saw in his practice that his patients really responded well when they removed grains from their diet. So grains, number one, especially gluten, and then number two, sugar. Sugar is such an inflammatory food, but it's become such a drug almost during these times. Children overconsume sugar. A lot of adults really have way too many carbs and sugar in their diets, and the brain just cannot work as well as what we think it can when we consume so much sugar. So the diet, when it's been cleaned up, the digestive tract responds and the brain responds in a big way. And we know that changes happen in the brain long before symptoms even start presenting themselves. So from a dietary point of view, I'm not going to get much more specific. I do work with people in my practice all the time, especially when there's digestive concerns, because we know that that ultimately will give rise to issues and inflammation in the brain. And we also know that Alzheimer's or dementia is being called type 3 diabetes. So those of you who've been following me for some time will know that I really talk a lot about the low carb diet, fasting, intermittent fasting, because those are the type of things that really help to restore brain health or to preserve brain health. The next point I wanted to make in terms of how we take care of this brain, this mental element. Many of you, and I almost want to say most of you, will be familiar with the concept of overthinking, where you just feel you can never get away from your thoughts. Constantly thinking, overthinking, thinking about yesterday, thinking about tomorrow, re-experiencing a conversation that you had even a week ago, trying to work things out. So this area of the body becomes so electrically charged, and I compare it to a thunderstorm. Lightning, as you know, needs to be earthed. So when we spend the majority of our day and week and year and lifetime here in our minds, it is like an electrical storm that hasn't been earthed. And that charge just seems to build and build and build until eventually you feel like you are governed. You are absolutely being controlled by your thoughts. And you know that is not always optimal. It's not pleasant. It can really even be quite debilitating, regardless of depression or anxiety, but just this constant thinking. And I feel it's absolutely necessary that we discharge at times. And how do we do that? Think of the electrical storm. It has to be earthed. How we earth? So simple. You don't need to meditate for an hour in order to discharge all this electrical charge that's going on in the brain. Excuse me. You can take your shoes off. You can either sit or stand. You can even walk barefoot either on the grass, on the beach sand, or just on the floor. And you can breathe in from the earth as if you're taking your breath from the center of the earth, pulling that breath all the way up as if you're pulling it right through the top of your head. And then on your exhale, you imagine that you're exhaling back into the earth. Just a few rounds of that feels like it anchors us and it grounds us. And you can even imagine that when you're inhaling that Mother Earth, that groundedness, that support. And when you're exhaling, you are releasing and exhaling all those thoughts, all those disruptive, continuous loops and cycles that keep going round and round and round without actually contributing much at all to your well-being. So breathing for me, especially if we do it very intentionally and deliberately like this, from the earth and then back out, is a very, very simple tool to just help us discharge and just ground ourselves. Another factor that really impacts on how we nourish our brain and our mental well-being is what we read, what we listen to, and what we watch. So you can imagine that if you always watching a crime series or even the news, if you're constantly spending time on social media, looking at news channels or the latest updates from pages or from groups where the theme is about fear, then you are nourishing your brain. You are not nourishing your brain. You are feeding your brain like with junk food. So when we become discerning about what we watch, what we listen to, what we read, and being quite intentional about what it is that we nourish our brain with, choosing every day to read something that makes us feel good, choosing every day to listen to something that feels uplifting. Already you've changed the vibration of what happens in the mind and in the mental aspect. So think about, how am I nourishing my brain? Am I giving it good nutrients in terms of what I eat? And am I giving it good nutrients in terms of what I watch, what I listen to, what I read? Because social media especially can become so addictive. And when I look around, I really see a lot of people talking about negative things, not just in the world, but especially also here in South Africa where I live. The theme can become an overwhelming sense of feeling powerless and feeling fearful. And that charge then carries through into the rest of the body, into your cells, into your tissues, into your organs. So you can imagine that if you want to feel better, you have to nourish your body on all levels, including your mind, with what you listen to. So uplifting music, something positive to read, etc. Regulating the nervous system, I know I spoke about last week as well, but in the context of mental well-being, it really is absolutely essential. So talking about the breathing like I did can really help to just slow down our breathing, slow down our thinking. So when it comes to that feeling grounded, it really can help us regulate our nervous system. If we're spending time in that fight or flight sympathetic nervous system zone, there's very little chance that you will feel like your brain is calm, that you're feeling focused, that you're feeling like of your day. I just want to plug my phone into my charge. Just give me a second. Okay, so how do we change our thought patterns? Because for me, it feels like we have to almost get out of our minds and into our hearts for us to be able to thrive during these times. There's enough stimulation mentally for most of us, but it's like we have become quite closed off when it comes to what we feel. And if we can start to create harmony between what we think and what we feel, our whole body will start to feel very different. How do we do that? Well, firstly, when you're feeling frazzled, when you've been stuck in a traffic jam or something didn't work out or somebody is late or you're missing a deadline and everything just starts to crumble around you, the first thing you can do is to just take a few breaths. Just drop into your chair, or if you can, go and stand outside where you can see the sun or a tree or nature perhaps, and just take a few breaths. And from what I'm reading, it takes about 4 breaths only to just get the nervous system out of that fight or flight mode. The particular breath that I have been noticing being mentioned in the realm of nervous system regulation is a very deliberate 2 inhale and then a big sigh on the exhale. So if you want to do it with me, and we can do 4, and you can just see how you feel. If you can, just take your shoes off for a moment, put your feet on the ground, whether it's the carpet or the floor, and then imagine you breathing in from below the soles of your feet, from the earth, and 2 in breaths, and it goes like this. So 2 in breaths and then a big sigh on the out breath. And every time you inhale, you imagine you're doing it from the earth. Imagine where the roots of the trees are there, ancient trees, their wisdom, their knowledge, their support, and how that can anchor you. So this is something very, very easy to try. 4 of those breaths can really just get us into a calmer, much more regulated state. And then we are not so just in the brain, in the mind, and feeling like everything is on top of us. Excuse me. If you are able to meditate, that is always first prize. I mostly use guided meditation. So in other words, somebody's voice who tells me what to do, what to imagine, or whether it's a visualization. And that just helps us to climb out of that brain and how it's thinking about all sorts of things going wrong and just getting back into our bodies. And another thing I wanted to mention in terms of regulating or harmonizing between the brain and the heart is if we can start our day with a few calming breaths, like anchoring us, just feeling I'm here on solid ground, I'm safe, I'm supported. You can even put one hand on the heart, one hand on the belly, and you can say, you are safe now, you are safe, you are loved, you are supported. So the body responds to that. You can tell it what you want it to imagine or to visualize. But if we can drop into the heart and imagine what it is we want to feel. So say, for example, you are waking up feeling dread, hopeless, fearful, anxious, overwhelmed. Just by doing a few breaths, you can now say, right, what do I want to invite in today? Because I don't want to stay in the state of fear. It's paralyzing and it does not create a space for the body to thrive. So if joy or gratitude feels just too much, if it feels too out of reach, you can perhaps just imagine, okay, I want to invite an ease. What does ease feel like? If I imagine that right now I'm feeling at ease, how does it feel? And you create a reference for that feeling. To say I'm at ease, I'm at ease, I'm at ease, you can repeat it 100 times. If you can't create that feeling in the body, you are totally wasting your time with affirmations. That's why I usually suggest that people find something that's real, that's sincere, that's authentic. So don't aim for peace and love and joy if you feel that the only thing that you can actually manage to create a feeling for is hope or ease or perhaps appreciation. Appreciation for me sometimes can feel very easy to connect with. So you start your day with a few breaths and you think, I appreciate my body, and you feel it sincerely. I appreciate the tree outside. I appreciate the color of the scarf I'm wearing. I appreciate the sound of the ocean if you're living near the sea. And that sense now creates a completely different vibration in the body that makes it far more conducive to feeling well, to create an environment where healing is possible. So starting every day with a few breaths and then deciding, how do I want to feel today? And you rehearse that. I know Joe Dispenza, I follow him with his meditations and his ideas around how we change our lives. We have to change the way that we feel. So if you're feeling overwhelmed every day, your body is just going to get used to that, and it's just going to keep on repeating that same sequence. It becomes a very familiar pathway. And that is where I then want to mention the word plasticity, neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity describes something that says that we create a different pathway in the brain. If you're always brushing your teeth with your right hand, if you're always stirring your tea or your coffee with your right hand, if you're always taking the same route to work, and once you start to change that, so take your cup in your left hand, for example, brush your teeth with your left hand, that will start to create new neural pathways. And neuroplasticity is very much what is needed in terms of our brain health. But coming back to the feelings, how we feel, we can now start to create something that feels different by inviting in a different emotion, a different feeling. And even if it doesn't feel like that's sustainable, so I know that I'm facing something big today. I have to go into a meeting that's very intimidating, but I can create a feeling in my body where I stand in my power, where I feel powerful, where I feel like I can make a difference, where I know I'm being completely authentic. And that starts to create like a ripple effect. And before you know it, the more you practice that, the more that becomes your reality. So your entire operating system now comes from a base that is a much higher vibration compared to before. So out of fear, we now go into power, or we now go into confidence, for example. So there are so many ways in which we can practice this. There are so many ways in which we can apply this or implement this, and this is just one example. So changing our thought patterns doesn't have to be necessarily a forced effort where we keep saying, I am confident, I am confident. That doesn't change anything. You imagine, what does it feel like in my body? Where do I feel it? Do I feel it in my solar plexus? Do I feel it in my throat? Do I feel it in my shoulders? Is it the way I stand? And then before you know it, you start to live that brand new reality. And every cell in the body starts to respond to that. So if I can leave you with this one bit, it is just deciding every day very intentionally, even if you write it down, how do I want to feel today? And then with your breath, you create that feeling. We started off with the brain talking about thoughts, intrusive thoughts, overthinking, but it's ultimately how we can shift that heavy load, that big charge that's here in our minds, shift it down where it can start to feel better, and how we can discharge those thoughts into the earth and breathe in something that feels supportive. Now we are connected. Now our roots are connected to our crown chakra and above. Now we are able to start feeling like there's movement, like there's harmony, not just in the brain, but actually through the rest of the body. Any questions or any comments? We're running out of time, but I'd love to hear from you, even what you're struggling with, or what you would like to add, if you have a question or a comment. It's lovely to see you all online. Thank you for joining me, and we will continue with our updates. I hope that Candace will be able to join me for our next recording. But please, you are welcome to leave your comments, your questions. We will try to answer that. If it's something that requires more time, we can make a plan with that as well. So I know for me that overthinking is something that can derail me very easily. So I spend a lot of time focusing on my breathing, trying to listen to guided meditation, trying to listen to music while I'm working that's very calming, very soothing, and not something that's going to feel like it's going to frazzle me more. And then I really pay attention as much as I can with my diet, and then this week with the fasting, and I'll keep you posted with that as well. Great. Thank you everyone for listening and for joining. And I hope that you find this useful. If you want anything else for us to discuss in our next two sessions, please leave us a comment, and have a beautiful day. Have a wonderful week. Have a powerful solstice. Go and try and implement these few tools or techniques that I've chatted about this morning.